Anyway, to get back and to abstract also. When we take this abstractness, we get away from details and we look at the bigger picture, the overall picture, and we see the commonalities, the things that we can hold on to, that we can utilize in any situation, not only that particular situation. And this is very, very, very valuable. And it's an underlying theme that goes throughout the story. And particularly in this chapter, yes, we have details, very specific details. She interacts with that infernal machine and all of the things that go on. But when we start to look at the abstract, that's when we start to be able to extract value and usefulness. And this was my theme yesterday, and I'm going to continue. My deep theme, my center column, as it were. How can we get value, extract value, not just get value, right? But extract value and usefulness. And this is a deep theme, right? And particularly this particular usefulness and value that's in the story. Yeah. 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 All right. So this is a cool thing that we're going to attempt here and go into. And just on this topic, right? So this valuableness and usefulness, this is a big deal. This is really a big deal, because otherwise, if we listen to the stories, you might say, yeah, but still, I do get value. The value, I'm being entertained. It's interesting. Yeah. But there's more to value than that, right? There's much more. That's much more to that. One second. Part of getting value, especially when it comes to value of in interacting with others, uh, is to really pay attention to motivation. All right. So if we pay attention to motivation, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Yeah. Because if we don't really pay attention to motivation, then much is missing. Now, this is a bigger theme that goes throughout the entire story. It's just coming up as pertinent and relevant right now. So obviously in this story, well, you could say, well, what was Biella's motivations? And we can look into that. It's very profound. But the point I want to make, and the machine's motivations, because the machine was kind of rude and, kind of a bit obnoxious and whatever. But when we start to look at motivations, then it makes more sense. It makes sense. Yeah. So when we look at motivations, the key is if we don't have some broadness in our understanding of motivation, we can easily not see what's going on, right? For instance, if we assume the machine's motivations are negative because it's kind of being a bit rude and obnoxious, if we assume that, because that's typically what goes together, but that's the key with motivations. They're not always typically related. So when we see, oh, wait a second, let me set that aside and let me assume there are other motivations. Now the machine's behavior takes on a whole other agenda, and it's actually quite profound. Its behavior, even though it's a bit obnoxious and slightly rude, there's a logic to it. There's a deeper sensibility to it, because it's shifting Shah out of her comfort zone, out of her usual way of thinking, and it's getting her to not think typically. So she's a bit distracted, and in that distraction, there's space for otherness to come in, right? So it's a very powerful technique. Yes. And it's not always the most ideal technique, because, well, it can turn people off. She could have just said, well, the hell with you, machine, and just left, right? So it's not the most ideal, but in the circumstances, and particularly the way the machine happens to be, and as part of the culture of the nobility, and it's not something that Shah now obviously can talk about, because it needs to be a fresh experience for anybody else, right? So she might take somebody there, or Biella might take them, or other new nobles, but you can only come to it via somebody else, or maybe you can come upon it by accident. But then, at least if you had some sensibility of anomalies, you'd be paying attention, and you say, oh, this is very anomalous. And, well, anomalies always, we understand, to be motivated by the most profound motivations and intents, in terms of profound goodness, profound sensibility, profound moreness, all of it, right? So then, if you came upon it as just by yourself, it would certainly be anomalous, and you would then insist on those motivations. So either way, the machine works quite marvelously as it is. But this is really powerful. This is very, very powerful, to pay attention to motivations, because if we assume negative motivations, right, like when Shah could have done potentially, right? She didn't, because Biella had brought her there, so she was already in that space. But if she had, he would have seen the machine as behaving negatively to her, because we tend to reinforce our beliefs of motivations. Confirmation bias, right? It's a particular form of confirmation bias. So, in other words, because we have a belief, we find evidence to support our belief. This is what confirmation bias is. And when we find evidence to support our belief of a negative motivation, it can completely kill and eliminate entirely what is being shared, what is happening, what is done, right? I mean, Shah would have not gotten anywhere if she, looked at things. Well, this machine is rude, and then a bit more. Oh, okay, this machine has got negative intent, and then she leaves, and none of that magic would have happened, right? So she could have lost all of that by an assumption of negative motivation, right? Right. Give me one moment again, yeah. All right. So motivations can affect how we perceive reality, in other words, or at least our assumption of motivation. Yeah. Now you say, yeah, but still, but wait a second. How do I know? How do I know what motivations are? Yes, we don't. We don't always know. But if we only select a particular group of motivations, then that is going to distort us to only seeing what is relevant to those motivations. Right. So I'm going to come back to this topic of motivations because I want to just say hello, Elizabeth. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning to you. Yes. Oh, listening while driving. Wonderful. All right. And yeah, and Norma says, slow down, slow down, slow down, in case you can't read either, because if you can't type, you can't read. So keep it. Oh, she says, keep it slow, not slow down. Keep it slow. And Ramsey is here. Hello, Ramsey. Yes. Hello. Good morning to you, Ramsey. Good morning to you. Wonderful, wonderful. I love this. I love this that you guys are here. So I don't know how much you caught of what I was saying about motivations, but well, what I'm going to say next is kind of a recap. So part of the new nobility culture, at least not, well, it is a major part, but it's also a core element of their culture. And this core element is the assumption of profound motivation. More than assumption in those on Nobelia, right? This is of aspirants and new nobles. They understand that when well, they use this with everybody, but there's a more layered sophistication there. So what makes the culture work on Nobelia is that they go beyond assuming motivation. They insist internally that all others are there, right? Like in our environment here, right? We assume and insist, never mind assume, we insist that the motivations of those here are good, benevolent, profound, sensible, sober. Yes, we insist on this. Why? Because, well, I know you guys, Norma, Ramsey, Elizabeth, just as examples. I know you motivated by goodness. Your intent to goodness is so deep, it is who you are. And your intent to moreness is also a profound part of you. Now, not everyone has an intent to moreness. Some are content to just be where they are, right? So intent to moreness is not something that you have to have, need to have. No, it's a bonus thing, right? But the intent to goodness, well, that's hard to avoid. That's hard to escape. It can get severely distorted, yes. But in most people I know, it's there. Certainly in you guys, this is very clearly obvious to me. Now, do I know for a fact that whatever you sharing, right, like in comments and wherever, do I know for a fact that this is coming from a positive motivation? No, I don't. But am I going to insist it is? Yes. Why? So that I don't inadvertently misunderstand you. Like Shah could have inadvertently misunderstood the infernal machine. Right? If she'd insisted on, or at least believed, just like seems to be apparent, like the obvious is that the machine is negatively motivated. It's kind of crappy, it's petty, it's egotistical, blah, blah, right? It's actually not. It's very, very, very sophisticated. All of that was there as a mechanism to leverage Shah out of her typical thinking and into a different space so that she could be receptive to this moreness, right? And just to act, just do. Yes, and it created a very profound experience as a result. So very, very sophisticated. But if we are just given to assuming motivations and we don't think, well, we don't have this opening to jump outside of the paradigm, the superiority paradigm, where all motivations are petty and childish and superiority-based hierarchy, dominance, ego, status, all of this nonsense. If that's our world that we are using to pick from when it comes to motivations, the choices aren't very good. What motivations in the superiority paradigm are really genuine, real moreness motivations? None of them. That's why it's the superiority paradigm, because it's about dominance, not about actually being good. Doesn't care to whether you're good or not. It cares whether you are relatively better, where you're dominating, right? Or you're just higher in the hierarchy. That's the care. That's the concern, right? So it's a very artificial thing. It may use this idea of good as a leverage thing, but doesn't really mean it, right? It's hollow, in other words. But when we start to understand that there are other options of motivations, when we step outside the superiority paradigm, when we get into moreness paradigm, right? In whatever way, shape, or form a moreness paradigm takes shape, it can be in many, many different ways, right? We're just exploring different variations or different ideas or potentials of these alternative moreness paradigms. When we look at and we insist, oh wow, you know, I look at the comment there and I say, wow, oh hello, Elliot, I'm glad you're here, man. When I look at X's comment in there, and I say, X, what on earth did you mean there? I don't get it. I don't understand what you're saying, X. I'm really a bit puzzled here, right? But at least I'm saying this to myself. Say, man, X, that didn't sound very nice. You sound like whatever. Right? But then I said, whoa, step back. Let me insist that X's motivation was the most positive possible. Now I look at X's comment again, like I'm looking at the infernal machine's behavior. I said, whoa, okay, maybe X is doing, I don't know. So then I can just say, X, I don't know why you're saying this. I don't get it. I assume your motivations are positive. Please explain. Right? But I'm starting from a different position. I'm open to moreness that might not be visible to me because I am insisting on positive motivation. If I don't insist on that positive motivation, I'll never see the moreness because all I'm going to do is just package it and conform it to the petty motivations. Yeah. So I can't do that. And this is a most sophisticated maneuver. It is the core of the new nobility. They apply this to everything. It's one of the absolute most vital core things that makes that community work. So in other words, how can they ever argue with each other? How can they ever be upset with each other? They can't because they know, and they know. They don't even insist. I mean, they don't even assume. They insist that the motivations of those that are there are the most wonderful, beautiful, positive motivations possible. Motivations and intents, not just motivations. But they're very related, right? So no matter what you do, I'm going to insist that it's done for some really, really good reason. I might not see it, but I'm going to insist it so. So how can I possibly argue with you? It's not possible. See? What a beautiful society. What a beautiful society. That doesn't mean that I might not be puzzled by what you say or confused by what you say or not understand. Of course, that's going to happen. But when I am puzzled, confused, not understanding, if I insist on the positive motivation, then there's a whole entire different follow-on procedure. Yes, argument is avoided because now we are looking to understand and unravel what's been shared. Right? It's a mystery that we're now exploring and we know it's a mystery that has a positive resolution. Those are joyful mysteries, right? Whereas if I assume a negative motivation, I'm still trying to understand what's going on. Well, then the end of the resolution is we're going to have to uncover your negative motivation, and that's not fun. Sometimes it's necessary; it can't be avoided. But I'd much rather have it where it's coming from a positive motivation, right? Now, the assumption and the belief and the insistence of positive motivation, this is the core. Because you might not have a negative motivation, but you might just have a negative assumption. And well, if we get to that also, that's not so fun either, right? So this key point that I'm making is a very big deal. Hey, Michaela's here too. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I love it. I love it. I love it. So please, I'm going to go back to the slides in a moment, but I'm keen to hear your comments on motivation and intent. Yes. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. This is a very, very big deal. Right? It's a very big deal. So I really want to hear more on this because it's so central to the entire story. and this alternative paradigm, this alternative culture that we're exploring, not because we're saying this is how you must be, but for the purpose of saying, here's a potential, feasible alternative. Yeah. So this is a very, very, very big deal. Yeah. 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 Very big deal. So I'm keen to hear about yes, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning. Yes, everybody. Yeah. I love it. I love it. I love it that you're all here. It's most exciting. It's most exciting. Just getting some junk messages there that I had to take care of. And I'm keen to hear what you think on this point of motivation. I'm really keen to discuss this, as it's pertinent and relevant today. The universe has brought this up in an anomalous way. So it's a very key discussion that I'm keen to have. And since I mentioned it before in a couple of the other previous lives, since it's such a key issue to what's going on. And then also I want to get back to this way we were doing the deep discernments and the tasks and exercises with Shah. But I'm keen to hear about the motivation. Keen to hear about the motivation. And how, and also maybe share. Let me ask you guys this question. Think about your last interactions with when somebody did said or said something and you were like frowning away. I don't know if I can really make a good frown here. And we are like, you're grumpy, disgruntled, they're not happy with whatever they were doing. Yes. And then ask yourself, what did I assume their motivations were? Not what were their motivations, but what you assumed their motivations were. Now you might say, yeah, but it was very clear and obvious what their motivations were. Well, Shah could have said that about the Infernal machine. Well, it was very clear and obvious what its motivations were. Yeah, it was being rude. Well, if you're being rude, what's your motivation? It's not nice. It's not pretty. But that would be a failure of imagination, would it not? Would that not be a failure of imagination? In that case, if Shah had insisted that the machine's motivations were negative or its intents were negative. Yeah. So this is a very profound thing. So think about your last interaction that where you interacted and it wasn't very fun, and what you were perceiving or assuming the motivations were to be. Yeah. Share there. Share. Let's hear some. Maybe you all can't type right now. Maybe you're all driving or doing something else, like Lisa. So no worries. You know, if again, you know, if you don't respond, there's no obligation, of course. You know, never, ever, ever, never, ever, ever. Always freedom, as much possible freedom as we can manage. And that's the other point. The deep motivation of the new nobility is not to tell you how to be free. They can't do that. It's not possible. Not tell you how to be. Not possible. They can't do that. However, what they can do is share options, share choices, right? Not just sharing, hey, this works for me, but to share all the choices, as many as they possibly can, to share the choice of choice itself. Yeah. And that's what I'm sharing now. I'm sharing about choosing, deliberately choosing to evaluate and to determine what motivations are, and then to go really sophisticated. And let me insist that they're positive and start from there. They might not be, but let me at least start from there. Because if I start with the insistence that your motivations are positive, I'm open to, when they are like the machines, where they are positive, but the behavior doesn't match the typical motivation that comes from that. Typical, right? It was exceptional, really deep, profound, good intent, moreness intent of the machine, but that's not typically associated with that type of behavior, right? So this, when I insist on starting with positive motivations, and I don't just say it's an assumption, I say it is so, then my brain is maximally geared to finding how And this is a profound thing. This is a profound thing. Now you're seeing stuff that you never would have seen before. So it's a way to leverage ourselves. It's a very, very, very big deal. Very big deal. All right. So we'll put this motivation on hold, and we'll come back to it as we do. You know, things come, they recur regularly. And what I'm going to do is go back to our tasks and exercises and look at that, right? So we just get to the right screen here. It's not this one. It is, yeah, there we go. Oh, yeah. I have to reload, You know, that's a good point for life in general. You know, when you have like that, reload the page, refresh the page. This is something we need to do to ourselves on a regular basis also. Yeah. As we can get a bit stale, we can get a bit stuck. Yeah. So it's very important to refresh ourselves, to reload. Here we are. So that's where we were yesterday, right? And on these first 2 points here, elaborate on how anomalies resolve that. And we did discuss that in a big way, and it's a big point, right? I'm not going to go over it all again, but that is one of the magics of anomalies. It's the intent of anomalies to assist you to resolve doubt. And doubt here is a capital D doubt, so it means something you want to know, something you don't understand, something that's confusing, not in the usual sense of just doubt only, right? But all of those are always a doubt in some way or another, right? So anomalies, this is their intent, since we're talking about intent and motivation. So talking about intent and motivation. So here's this quote. Biella decided to take a chance, sensing the need to prod ever so slightly. What are the bigger picture implications in regard to Biella's psychology from that? From that sentence? If we say, Biella decided to take a chance, sensing the need to prod ever so slightly. What does this say about Biella's psychology? That's a pretty cool question there, right? And this is what we are practicing, and this story is all about deepness, moreness, yes? And we want to have this deepness and moreness. We want to have discernment. And what exactly is discernment? Please share, you guys. Before we get into, we're going to discern somewhat Biella's motivations here, at least as far as we can, or at least her psychology. And of course, we're going to speculate, right? And we're going to see how much we can substantiate our speculations. But please share, first of all, what does discernment mean to you guys? As much as you can. If you guys can't type, just say so, and then I won't wait for comments, because, you know, like Elizabeth, she can't respond, and then I'll just share on my own. Yeah, I like to be interactive though. I really enjoy it. I enjoy when you guys share, and I can comment on what you're sharing, and your sharing inspires me, and I learn from things. I always learn. By the way, I'm always learning, always learning. Every time you guys share stuff, I learn. And there are many ways to learn, right? This is what most of us don't really understand. There are many ways to learn. Yeah. It's such a magical thing. All right. So Ramsey says, well, for me, I learned that not to link my motivation to positivity or negativity. I'm rather neutral when behaving, so I don't get disappointed. However, I make sure my motivations always lead to positive goals. Yes. So there's a lot of nuance in the language here. Yes. When I say positivity, I am meaning an expectation of goodness. Right? And expectations of goodness in some way or another. Now, sometimes when people say positivity, they mean like cheerfulness or false cheer, which puts them off, right? Or maybe optimism, which is an unreasonable expectation of positivity. Well, typically, not always, but, you know, or at least it has that implication that optimism can be unreasonable. Whereas in the deeper meaning of positivity, you are insisting that things will work out, and it may or may not be necessarily substantiated, but it's a more sophisticated act of insisting that, hey, the world is a positive place, and on the whole, overall, it's moving towards more and more positivity, right? So when we look at positivity, it's kind of a deeper thing a little bit. All right, it depends on a bit how we define positivity and optimism. But I suspect that when Ramsey says he doesn't want to link it to positivity or negativity, and that is to insistence of outcome. Now, insistence of outcome is a very different thing than linking it to what you would hope it works out to, and what you would like to see it to work out to, and what you believe the chances are of it working out to, right? So when we do this and we connect to that, now we see, hey, you know what? My motivations are always connected to goodness. Yes. Whether that, and goodness, of course, is positive, right? So if you look at it in that way. So just some nuanced language usage there, and something to keep in mind, that when it comes to the meaning of phrases and words, there's a great range of flexibility, and much of it is contextual, right? And we have to understand that it changes depending on the context, right? So in this case with positivity, right, within Ramsey's comment there, he's using positivity in different ways, which is very, very powerful. Magic of anomalies, like, are you asking, Norma? Oh, it's a follow-on on the next comment. Like the perfectness of the idea, the act of creating, the belief is essential. Yeah, beliefs are important, but we have to be very, very, very careful with beliefs, because beliefs are often confused with facts. Yes. And why? Because somebody believes something so strongly that they believe it is a fact. Now, no matter how strongly you believe something, if it's not a fact, it's not a fact. It's just that. Now, oftentimes our belief is something that is about something that's impossible to determine whether it's a fact or not. Take afterlife. Yeah, we don't know if there's an afterlife. We have no factual evidence of this. Some people may dispute that, but I'm just saying in general now, as for purpose of example here, right? So when I believe in the afterlife, and I really truly strongly believe in that, I'm treating it as if it's a fact, but it's still a belief. Even though it's a fact to me, maybe I still have to understand that it's not so. So telling. You lost me a little bit, Norma. Can you put it all in one comment instead of hitting enter after each one, and wrap it together for me? I'm a little lost on what you mean here exactly. I want to know more. I want to believe. Yes, telling. We can't tell. We've got to share. Yeah, yeah. So we don't want to be telling. We don't want to be telling. As soon as I tell you, I'm saying this is so, and then you say, well, how do you know? Based on what? And now it becomes a whole issue. But if I say to you, this is my personal understanding of things, you can evaluate it as my understanding rather than saying it's a fact. Yeah. So you lost me a little bit, Norma. I am keen to hear more. Hear more. So let me go into Biella's psychology while we wait for Norma's moreness there. Very interesting stuff that you're saying there. No. Please don't stop saying, Norma. I just want to understand more. All right, maybe I should watch the comments and tie it to what I'm saying, because there's a 30-second delay, you see, Norma, so I don't always see that. So you have to sort of, when you're commenting, you have to kind of say what you're commenting about, rather than just the directness. I mean, I could, when I replay it and then watch the comments in real time, then I'll see directly what it's connected to. All right. So no, please don't be quiet. No, please comment. Yeah. I love your comments, Norma. No. Please don't stop. I thought you were making a deeper point. I didn't realize these were just responses. No, please make as many as you like. In that case. I just didn't understand, Norma. That's all. Just did not understand. So if we take this, Biella decided to take a chance, right? What does this say about her psychology? Well, by implication, if she's deciding to take a chance, one, that she's being deliberate and thoughtful, that says a lot about her, her psychology, right? That she's deliberate and thoughtful, as opposed to simply taking a chance, right? Just doing and not thinking about it, right? So yeah. No, 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 no. It was totally appropriate, Norma. Totally appropriate. Totally appropriate. I love it. That's why I always wanted to be here. I just want to know more. I love what you're doing. I just want to know more. Yeah, I thought that maybe you'd accidentally been hitting enter. You know what I mean? And you were making one combined point. But I understand now what you're doing. Oh, thoroughly appropriate. Wonderful, Norma. Wonderful. Please keep going. Please keep going. Sorry, I misunderstood. Sorry, I misunderstood. So anyway, I'm saying Biella decided to take a chance. Right? So I'm also demonstrating capital R reading, where by implication, if you're deciding, you're being deliberate, right? And if you're being deliberate, this is a very cool thing in your psychology, particularly when it comes to taking a chance, right? Many people take chances without deciding to do so. Happens all the time. Pay attention, look around you, right? Take lots of chances. And then, of course, when it doesn't work, then they complain. It's like, well, you weren't paying attention. You took a chance because you weren't living deliberately, right? You were just going along, a leaf in the world, willy-nilly, yeah, whatever, and it's little t trust. Well, I trust the universe will take care of me. Well, I can be lazy. I cannot be impeccable. I cannot be thorough, disciplined, and act with diligence and scrupulousness and all of this stuff, right? So, yeah, I'll be taken care of. No, doesn't work. And then you get smacked upside the head by life and the universe and everything, and then you wonder why. Yeah, well, you weren't being impeccable. It's very simple. You were taking chances that you had no business taking, that you had no need to take, and you weren't doing so deliberately, right? When you take a chance deliberately, that's a whole different thing. Now, if it doesn't work out, that's okay. I knew that it might not, and I'm not going to complain if it doesn't, right? So, in other words, that first part of that sentence there, Biella decided to take a chance. It also implies that Biella is willing to take responsibility for the outcome and consequence of her chance. That's a very profound thing, right? When we're willing to do that, right? Because of course because she's always going to be impeccable, so it's not a problem. Now, to get onto impeccability, I'm going to use this term a lot. Impeccability doesn't mean being without mistake. It doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean we cannot make mistakes, but it means that we can justify why we did something and have a really substantial, thorough justification, right? In other words, if it doesn't work out, I say, well, you can see I really, 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 really did do my absolute best, whatever I could. I was diligent, scrupulous, thorough, conscientious. Yes. I made every effort. I gave the issue due respect. I didn't just treat it as, well, yes, that's a petty thing. No, I gave it due respect. That's why I researched it. I checked it out. I explored it. I shifted perspectives on it. I thought it through to the end, etc., etc. I did all of these things, which says that, and the reason I'm doing this is now impeccability demands it. So should it turn out to not be what I thought it was, I'm at peace. I did everything I could. I'll be at peace. I'll have no regrets about my decisions and my actions. Yes. Very profound point of impeccability. It leads to no regret living. Yeah. But this is taking responsibility though too. Whatever comes, comes. Doesn't matter, because I'm willing to take that responsibility because I'm also impeccable. And I minimize the chances of things not working out. I absolutely minimize that, right? So I take the least amount of risk possible because of my impeccability. So of course, responsibility, not an issue. Yes. Um, and so it's a very big deal. Just in that one little phrase there, we can see tons about the responsibility. By implication, of course, right? I'm not saying it's necessarily so, but likely so. So please share more. Please share more, Norma. Please share more. Let's see what Ramsey has to say. Usually our mood and feelings drive our motivations and actions, or the motivations behind our actions. I'm not sure how you mean it exactly there. I detach myself from that. So who I am as a positive being is separate from my actions. Yes, that's a very powerful thing, to have that discernment and that detachment between our actions, because our actions are sometimes just governed by the circumstance, right? And not necessarily coming from our deep us. We try and combine them as much as possible, of course. This way allows me to watch my motivations and actions from an objective angle, and that's very important. Yes. And this is part of this deeper philosophy that's going to come up in the story of I is more than one. We are a conglomerate. And if we don't develop the ability to have some perspective on ourselves, we cannot see from outside the bubble. So in order to have awareness, actual real awareness, we need to be at least two. Because if you're just a one, literally just a one, you have no way of seeing yourself from the outside. And therefore, you have no way of getting discernment of yourself, understanding of self. You're always inside a bubble. So, and awareness is the ability to see ourselves. At least it's a major component of awareness. So we have to be at least two in order to be self-aware. It's just the nature of the deal. Yes. If you're not so, if you don't see yourself externally in some way or another, you cannot possibly be self-aware. You may be aware of your environment, yes, but not self-aware, right? Because your environment is external. See, so self-awareness absolutely needs to have at least two. Yeah. So this way allows me to, Ramsey says, this way allows me to watch my motivations and actions from an objective angle. Objective is a very powerful thing to try and strive for. By this way, I do things and act on my decisions regardless if I feel like doing them or not. And that's impeccability. Our feelings have nothing to do with it. Yes. And you do what is required, what is appropriate, whether you feel like it or not. Yes. The famous example of this comes from Dune, the story Dune, where the young Duke, the Duke's son, right? It's not the Duke yet, the Duke's son is getting training, weapons training. It's a fictional story with dukes and all sorts of stuff, right? And it's set in the future if you don't know it. Anyway, so he's getting his weapons training, and the weapons master comes and says, "Come, let's do training." And it was a rough day, and everything was happening and falling apart. He said, "I'm not in the mood." But the way I'm maybe paraphrasing and hamming it up a bit, a little adding a bit of hyperbole, but the weapons master is like, really? Seriously? Like, what the heck is this nonsense? What the hell has mood got to do with it? And he starts attacking him. Well, of course, now he has to defend himself, right? Because the weapons master is going to give him some serious either smacks or even wounds if he doesn't, right? I mean, this is a for real attack. Of course, the weapons master is making a point. Yeah. Mood has nothing to do with it. If you need to respond, you have to respond. Your mood has got nothing to do with it. And if you're going to say mood when it comes to interacting, like, okay, this is weapons training, which is fighting training as a warrior, as a soldier. If your mood is going to determine how you behave, well, you're going to be dead in a hurry. Yeah. You can't say to your enemy, you know what, sorry, opponent, I'm not in the mood for fighting today. Well, they're going to say, okay, yeah, you get a pass. I'll go fight with someone else. No, I'm going to cut you down, and that's the end of you, right? And say, thank you for the gift. Yeah. So mood has nothing to do with it. And when it comes to appropriateness, and when it comes to ethics, and of course, our impeccability, ethics is a key part of impeccability. Like I said, being conscientious. To be conscientious is to be ethical. It's the same thing, right? To be conscientious is well, it's not exactly the same. It's to be ethical according to our eternal ethics. This is conscientious, because that's what our conscience is the determiner and evaluator of our internal ethics. Yes. So this is a big point, that we want to be conscientious. Yeah. And when we do this, mood has nothing to do with it. I can't just decide today something is ethical because I feel like it. What kind of ethics is that? Yes. Now, as a deeper understanding why mood has nothing to do with it, because good is not always nice. We'd like them to go together, but they aren't always the same. Yeah. So sometimes good is not so nice. We can shift to a way of living where we do get good and nice combined, but that means we have to be ahead of the game. And the head of the game when it comes to learning and growing. We've got to seek it out, seek it out, seek it out. Because if not, if you don't seek it, the universe is going to give it to you in a nice, joyful way to learn. But then it's going to say, well, if you don't take that, okay, there's a less fun way. And eventually it's going to start giving you smacks upside the head if you really don't want to learn. And when you really look at when people have profound things that happen in their lives that aren't nice, and you look for that abstracted, deeper soul lesson, the real need the person had to learn, they will inevitably tell you, yeah, well, I didn't listen, and now I have to listen. Yeah. So a very big point. So good isn't always nice, but we can have them together if we don't, if we learn when the universal lessons, the lessons of awareness, are brought to us in beautiful, fun, delightful ways. Yes. Yeah. Now let's assume that Shah had acquired more of the skills of that she's there as an aspirant, right? And she wasn't like, and she had an ability to mood manage and apply what I've been saying now. When the machine came with that rudeness, she would have just laughed at it, say, "Well, this is just being amused." You know, you wouldn't have, because rude is a function very much somewhat what's related much of the time, obnoxious to our ego and our perception. She would have just been amused. Well, this is a quaint machine. But and if she had insisted on that motivation, say, oh, there must be some motivation for it. Okay, I'll go along with you, machine, right? And explore what goes on. Or she may have even figured it all out as to what it's trying to do. And then she may have been able to do that herself. Maybe not, but either way, right? She would have seen matters in a very different way, very different way. So yes, this point that Ramzi is making there to shift about motivations. So Norma, I still want to understand more of what you were saying there, like in the act of creation. So I do agree that, we need to create stuff very often. And when we can create an a belief that suits us, we need to maintain an understanding and not lose sight of the fact that we did actually create this. Yes. So it's very important. So belief is essential. Yes, Norma. And telling, yeah, we don't want to tell. So please share more, Norma. Please share more. 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 Yeah. Yeah. Very important. Very important. All right. So were you, Lisa? I'm missing you. I know Sher and Bina cannot be here today. They said they can't be, unfortunately. So, but I'm keen. I'm keen to hear from you. Keen to hear from you. All right. And where are we now? Oh, we're going into Biella's psychology here, right? So we said, wow, Biella decided to take a chance. So we're already saying that she's being deliberate and that she is willing to take responsibility. She's thoughtful, obviously. Sensing the need to prod ever so slightly. Now, need is a very subjective term. So Ramsey brought in objectivity, right? And sensing also subjective, but that's why it's a chance, because there may have been no need to prod whatsoever, but she's acting on this, willing to take that chance, right? And she knows that she's sensing something, and she's aware that it may be, right? But also ever so slightly, right? So there's a lot of reasons that come up to her why she does this. And yes, some of them are based on assumptions, but she's willing to do this because if it turns out that it doesn't, there is no need, well, what's the loss? Nothing. However, what's the gain? Moreness. She knows this from experience, right? She knows this from experience. So she's willing to take this chance to prod a little bit to see if there's more, because she knows Shah, and Shah's got lots of moreness in her. Like you guys, you have lots of moreness in you. So to prod you ever so slightly sometimes, man, why? Because the advantages are moreness coming out, see? And look at what happens in the comments. Moreness comes, right? So that prodding, that taking a chance is very powerful. And I might say, well, like you make a comment and I say, well, where's the moreness to this? What more is there? Like in Norma's comments, there's a moreness underneath it now because I know Norma already. So I do prod because I know there's moreness there. I just want to hear what it is, right? So very cool, very cool. But occasionally pushing boundaries was needed. Yeah. So Biella understands this. And when we look at Shah and the machine was really pressing on Shah's boundaries. So this is a bit of a foretelling, a foreshadowing of what's to come, right? A hint of what's to come rather than a foreshadowing. That's usually negative, but a hint of what's to come. But Biella is tapping into this, and the deeper intent that was, she picked up on this. Biella has very deep discernment and people interaction skills, and she understands psychology in this. So she has a reasonable expectations that her perceptions have a reasonable chance of being accurate, because she's demonstrated this in the past, right? So she can take this chance. There's a higher probability that it will be there. And so her assessment or her perception that Shah was in a space where her boundaries needed to be pressed a bit, yeah, to be extended a bit. This was an impression of hers, right? A discernment of hers. But she feels reasonably confident that she can do this. Again, we're looking at her psychology here, and we can say, well, Biella has a psychology, her own internal psychology is one that's also based on experience, right? And paying attention. So whose boundaries would Biella be referring to, and what again are the greater implications? Well, her own and Shah's. And the greater implications are that this is something that applies for all of us. Yes, not just particularly to Shah, as we might assume. No, because it says, but occasionally pushing boundaries was needed. Now, pushing boundaries, not having one's boundaries pushed. So if we really look at that more specifically there, we understand that Biella is saying that this boundaries, she's talking about, yes, it's Shah's boundaries, but her boundaries of pushing boundaries is what needs to happen, right? That is the necessity, right? So she's saying occasionally we have to do something that we wouldn't ordinarily do, which is to push the boundaries of others. But in the new nobility culture, they do this all the time. Why? Because if they push each other's boundaries, they can go beyond them. So they do it on purpose and deliberately, and they love doing it, right? I love when my boundaries are pushed and challenged because I get to extend myself. I get to become aware that, oh, this is a boundary. I didn't even realize I had a boundary here. Right? So it's this, but occasionally pushing boundaries was needed. In other words, she's saying the action of pushing others' boundaries is needed. See, in me doing it, me pushing boundaries is needed. Not only them having their boundaries pushed was needed, but on both sides, right? Being pushed and pushing, both are occasionally needed, right? Very, very sophisticated point there from Biella, right? Very sophisticated point. But Biella had a plan. What might Biella's plan be in regard to her taking a chance and how to proceed? Now, again, we have to somewhat speculate here, right? But if we said speculate here, her plan is that abstract plan I referred to yesterday. Her plan is to get to moreness. Her plan is to challenge the situation, environment, to push a few buttons, pull a few levers to see what happens, which is demonstrated and exhibited in the machine, right? An abstract thing coming to this. But so her plan is to have stuff happen. How? By taking the chance, by following the anomalies, by listening, by paying attention. So she takes the chance. Her plan then is, I'm going to take a chance, and then I'm going to pay attention to see what happens. I'm going to, also part of her plan is to insist on moreness by way of motivation, and to insist on moreness when it comes to randomness. Wow, that's a very profound plan, right? Right, and it works for her, as we see later, right? What a question, yeah, what a question. A form of expansion. Yes, exactly. Exactly. So when we take boundaries, typically a boundary says, here be the edge of something. Now, when we say personally, we say, this is the edge of me. Now, also, boundaries usually can also imply containment, right? These are my boundaries, don't cross them, as a sensitivity. But that just can be in certain instances. But when we say, hey, you know what, my boundaries are fairly open, that's just my boundary as far as I know. It doesn't mean I've set it there and I want to keep it there, which typically boundaries like on countries, they're there and they're there to keep you out and don't come in. But if I'm out in space, for instance, and I say, well, I'm exploring space and I'm making a map of space and I show what I've explored. The boundaries of my exploration are the edges of how far I've gone. Does that mean that's where I want to stop? No, I want to go further. See, so when you say this, a form of expansion, absolutely. When we start pressing on boundaries, it's a form of expansion. It's a mechanism for expansion. Yes, exactly, Norma. Very profound comment. Yes, wonderful, wonderful, Norma. So we do this on purpose because of expansion. And keep in mind, right now, I don't make it too often, but this nobleness program It is part of the Moreness project. And the Moreness project is a self-expansion project. Yes, that's intent is self-expansion. Yeah, self-expansion into moreness, right? That's the Moreness project. A very profound thing, very profound thing. So yeah, so when we understand that a boundary can be a limitation, well, I never thought of that. I never thought of that. I never thought of that. And I'm putting up boundaries, but yes, I'm keeping out the unwanted stuff, but I'm also keeping myself within my boundaries. Yeah. So when we expand that and we have boundaries that are somewhat flexible, right? It's a very different thing, right? It's a very different thing. So that's just currently. So when we understand that we have boundaries that are current boundaries, they're not really boundaries. They're just more the edges of our understanding rather than a boundary. Yeah, slightly different. So when it's a boundary, it implies there's a bit of keeping things out, right? So we want to say, no, we just want to have this be open and just be the current edge, something that's continually moving and growing so that it doesn't limit us. So when we get into expansion, it just keeps adding, it just keeps expanding, right? They aren't really a boundary. It's more open. Yeah, very powerful discernment there. Yeah, good point. Good point, Norma. Good point. Good, very good point. All right, so yeah, I got a good question for you. What is the what question mark in your life? What is the what question mark in your life? Hmm. 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 What is the what in your life? Well, I've been sharing what the what is in my life. The what in my life is paradigm shifting, is awareness, development, and enhancement. The what in my life is sharing, expanding my limits of my knowing, my boundaries, and not having boundaries. Freedom. I want to be unlimited. I want to be going out into infinity. That's the what in my life. What am I about? I'm about good intent. Yes. What is important to me? Good intent. Learning, growing, awareness, discernment, understanding, and of course, the major what? Application. I can have those things, but if I don't apply them, they're not going to mean much in the end, right? So the what of all of the sharing is application, change, being able to use all of this to get value out of it. Yes, that's the what, yeah. At least for me. Yes, at least for me. So it's a very, very big deal, what? Well, I asked this already. What's your random pick right now? Yeah, and that it led to a profound thing, because what was random for Sarah was that deep incident that she shared. It's a big deal, but it's a good thing to keep in mind, to practice, to say, can I really pick randomly, just out of nowhere? Yes, yeah. It's quite difficult to do, but it's a good skill to have. Very good skill to do. And the next, this is a pull, obviously, because it's in italics, a pull from what came before. We're prompted more often than we realize by life to introduce something, to start somewhere, to initiate. Let me read that again. We are prompted more often than we realize by life. We're prompted more often than we realize by life. We're prompted by life, in other words, more often than we realize, to introduce something, to start somewhere, to initiate. That's a statement, yes? Say, based on what? Based on what, author? Based on what? Well, let's go into that. How might this apply to you in your present life? Let's hear. Let's hear. Where you might not have thought of this before, but let's just assume this is so. And now say, okay, when was I prompted to start something, to initiate? Yeah, to introduce something. Can you guys give me some examples? Yes, with intent. Yes, 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 yes. Please elaborate, Norma. Please elaborate. Please elaborate. That's a big point that you're making there. That's a big, big, big point. We are asked by intent to initiate. Yes, to start. Yes, When we encounter this concept of intent, this deep understanding of intent, when we bring it into awareness, because it's kind of been around in our lives for a long time, but not necessarily in full awareness. But when it does come to full awareness, we say, whoa, 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 whoa. I need to come up with some intent here. I've got to initiate. I've got to start something. Yes. And if we just look at life in general, right? If I understand your comment, Norma, I'm sort of doing a repeat back of what I feel it to mean. At least for me, I'm more of a takeaway maybe than a repeat back. But I'm saying that, when we comes to initiating with intent, I have to say, you know what? The things I see out in life, I see the superiority paradigm as being the paradigm of the world we currently live in. I said, man, the intent of the superiority paradigm, that's not a good intent. So me being aware of this, I am forced and prompted, not forced, but prompted by the universe to say, initiate something that shows an alternative intents are possible. So if that's where you're referring to this and how you're going with this, most cool, Norma, most cool. I don't want to assume that I know what you mean, but at least your comment stimulated all that in me. And this is, again, see, that pressing. It's a fantastic thing. It's a positive pressing. Pre-knowledge of the result. Can you elaborate on that, please, Norma? Very interesting. Very interesting. Or at least I don't have a pre-knowledge of the result of my intent, but I have a pre-belief or assumption or desire to make it happen so. And sometimes we do know our intents will come, because that's the nature of intent. They typically do materialize, right? Because we put so much into them. So yeah, when we set an intent, we do somewhat have a pre-knowledge of the result. It's a very, very sophisticated point there, Norma. Oh, that's quite something. It's quite something. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it isn't technically accurate, but in actuality, that's what it amounts to. That an intent includes a pre-knowledge of the result, necessary for positive result, for positive intent. Yeah. Yeah, because if we didn't really absolutely truly believe that our intent is going to materialize the way we intended to, what's the point of doing it? Yeah, there'd be no point to it. We would never do it. Yeah. So we have to have some awareness or pre-knowledge of the result. Correct. I mean, this is what intent is. It is getting to a particular result that you wish to have. So you have to know what it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You at least you have to have a pre-knowledge of your intent result, not necessarily how it actually turns out in the end. So I see the nuance there that you're saying. So this being prompted to initiate, this happens many times, many instances, yes, where we are prompted to initiate. I mean, you may just be walking down the road and an anomaly comes your way. How does that not prompt you to start, to introduce something, to start somewhere, to initiate? You have no clue what the anomaly is about. So you have to start somewhere. You have to initiate thinking about it. You have to initiate some idea, some perspective, right? You have to start something. If you just leave it alone, it's just anomalous, and that's it. Well, we have an anomaly. Okay. I mean, take Star Trek, right? You have plenty of anomalies in Star Trek. They always say, Captain, so long-range sensors shows an anomaly. Okay. Well, I'm the captain. Yeah, whatever. We see them all the time. Right? End of episode. Right? If the captain just said, yeah, whatever, another blinking anomaly, the universe is full of them, so what? Yeah, that would be the end of the episode. But of course, how many episodes start off with an anomaly? Tons of them, right? Of course, oh, we're going to go and investigate. What's this all about? They can't leave an anomaly alone. You cannot. That's the nature of anomalies. You can't leave them alone. You have to investigate. So now you go and that have to go and investigate. That is you doing this initiation, right? Initiating something, right? Starting something. It's very important. And of course, to introduce something, you have to introduce ideas sometimes, different perspectives. You have to introduce many times. You have to introduce calmness, kindness, generosity, all sorts of things that we have to introduce. So we prompted very often by life. Envisage the result of for and against. Yes, Norma, that's a very, very, very powerful technique when you do that. And that's just perspective shifting, right? And your perspective shift to multiple perspectives, not just plus, minus, for and against, black, white. No, we want to look at it in all the possible colors. How can this go this way? How can it go this way? Yes, yes, to insist this can be exciting. Precisely. Precisely. We are adventuring into moreness, not adventuring into the scary, dark, deep, unknown, nothing there, maybe horror, whatever. No, no. Yeah, there may be danger, but doesn't matter. Danger can be exciting too. Isn't that what adventure is? When you're going along and things don't quite go the way you expect, and that's adventure, right? How you deal with it, and your attitude that you deal with it, that determines whether it's an adventure or a horror story or a calamity. Yeah, I mean, so many adventures. If the person had a bad attitude, those would be, oh man, I'm sorry to hear this. That was horrible and terrible. But when they had a good attitude, what an adventure! Dang, what an adventure! Is that amazing? How reality shifts based on our mindset, based on us initiating a mindset, an attitude, a choice of how we choose to relate to things. Yes, very exciting, Norma. Very, very exciting. All right, I want to hear some more there about just thoughts on anything that I've shared. And the reason being is I want to continue reading in a moment, but since I'm alone here and I can't ask whoever's with me to read the next slide, and I want to make coffee, you guys will just have to type stuff there. I need me some coffee. I need me some coffee. Just to go over again, just to share things that are important to me here. As we do these capital R readings, prompting, initiating, taking chances, and exploring, right? This is what leads to our self-expansion. And having this deeper mindset, and this intent to moreness. This intent to moreness, I cannot emphasize and repeat enough how important our intent to moreness is. Now, an intent to goodness is one thing, but an intent to goodness doesn't necessarily prompt us to initiate when it comes to learning and growth. Yes? Because an intent to goodness can make us just be accepting of life because, well, I intended to be good and I assume it's going to turn out to be good. And well, it kind of is what it is, but sort of, right? So I don't necessarily initiate when it comes to learning. I learn when it comes my way, but I don't necessarily initiate. I don't go out and explore, yes, and adventure. But because we so deeply love learning and growing, and enhancing and developing our awareness is so important to us, we do initiate. We are willing to go out and adventure. Yes, that's why you're here. This is an adventure. Yes, you say, so I don't really adventure. I'm just coming. Well, you here. Just being here, part of this life, means that you're willing to adventure, right? Yeah, maybe a very safe adventure. It's still an adventure nonetheless, right? You're pushing the boundaries of your understanding, your awareness, your thoughts, your expression, your sharing. You're doing all sorts of wonderful things, right? Adventure. We are coming into contact with the unknown with moreness. That's adventure, right? Or at least adventure is dealing with it in a positive way, in a fun way, yeah, rather than saying, yeah, complaining and moaning and whining. That's not adventure, right? Same activities might take place, but our intent and our attitude, etc., that's what determines whether it's adventure and joy and fun and moreness or not, right? It's amazing. It's amazing. The same exact things can be transformed simply by our mindset, our attitudes, our behaviors, our tools that we have, and particularly, of course, our intent. That's why clarity of intent, which I repeat over and over and over and over, is so crucially important, right? If we have an intent to just exist, yeah. If we have an intent to just survive, we have an intent to evolve. Well, that's going to take care of my survival also, right? But I might succeed in my intent to survive. It doesn't mean I'm going to evolve. Yeah. It doesn't mean if I can survive, I'm not necessarily going to be happy either. As long as I'm surviving, yeah, I could be surviving miserably, which so many do. So we need more. We need to initiate. Yes, we need to initiate. Very, 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 very profoundly important, this whole point of initiation. Yeah. And seeking more deliberately. Because if we don't, like I said, we could just be in stasis. We could just be going nowhere, just accepting. Well, and if your situation is okay, all right, I can't fault you for that. Again, that's what I'm saying. Moreness is a choice. It's not something that you have to do. If you're content with your situation, okay. Some people are content in not being particularly happy. All right, I'm surviving. Then that's all that matters to them. It's a bit limited, in my opinion, but so be it. So be it. Yeah. Yeah. It's just amazing. It's just amazing. Yeah. Very, very powerful, this seeing moreness here. I saw your name on GFA list. Have you heard from them? What's GFA list? I have no idea what that is, but I'm busy with something right now, person. I'm just seeing it come up there. Our messages just show themselves. Well, you'll have to wait for a response. No idea what that is. Not applicable right now. All right, let's go and read some more of the next story, yeah, and go through that. Yeah, one moment. Let me have some coffee first. I have to go back to the slide before the task and exercises. Oh. Finding a way to resolve this problem is very important. We're prompted more often than we realize by life to introduce something, to start somewhere, to initiate. That was the thought that Biella was at last, right? Biella trailed off deliberately, letting the thought hang between them, maintaining her intent and awareness on the theme, the central concept, keeping it an open question. She'd come to, I think there's more here than that last point there. Let's see. Yeah. So it is this. So if we left with the issue of how to choose randomly without guiding criteria, yeah. So we are left with the issue of how to choose randomly without guiding criteria. That's the thought that she's leaving there between them. Yes. How do we choose randomly without guiding criteria? This sometimes is very important, and this is obviously what's going to be resolved coming up, right? Because she's left it there now. That's where they got as far as they could go, and now they're going to essentially engage with the world, with the universe, to bring them the moreness that resolves this unresolved point there, right? Letting the thought hang between them, maintaining her intent. This is very important. She's maintaining intent and awareness on the theme, the central concept, keeping it an open question. And by keeping it an open question, she's inviting the world and the universe to come and assist her in resolving this. But she could explain it to Shah. But do you see the limitations there? Yeah. She could explain it to Shah, and Shah could say yes, yes, and Shah could explain it back and understand it. But will that be a life-changing explanation that transforms in a very powerful way, that has profound emphasis? No, just an explanation. Those can do that sometimes, but sometimes more is needed. Yes. And because Biella already got the clue with the anomalies that already happened, like with that friend, right? And Shah's way she came and interacted with her, all little, very tiny little anomalies maybe, but they add up. And Biella knows when they start adding up and there's a pattern to them, more is coming, right? So she knows already that, hey, all I've got to do here is go along for the ride and keep us on track, right? And so her keeping the intent here is an intent to resolution, right? And the theme is, right, how uh, to get resolution via a random, sometimes having utilizing randomness to jump us out of our blockages where we're at, right? Where we don't know and we need something extra to come in and to start a new path, a new whatever. Doesn't necessarily have to be random, but randomness is a good way to do that. She'd come to her objective, a small plain wooden sign, very simply declared, the Garden of Inspiration. Plain and unordinary in every way, if anything, uninspiring, boring even. Biella smiled inwardly. She continued past the sign, at the same pace and rhythm, giving no indication this a destination. Biella is very acutely aware of cueing, yes, and also pattern. If she'd slowed down or hesitated even, there would have been a clue that, oh, here's something more here. But she's not like she's trying to be secretive. She just doesn't want to influence inadvertently. Yeah. So she wants to leave it to happen organically and naturally, whatever's going, right? She'd already had this, more stuff is going, and she had a clue that, pushing boundaries, randomness, and all of this input choice, all this, she understands this is part of what the machine's intent is. That's why she's taking to the machine, right? So it's a very deliberate action by Biella, but not one she would undertake ordinarily. The situation is prompting her to do so, yes, to initiate. Yeah. And so this is her initiation in response to the situation. Now, there's quite a bit of sophisticated discernment going on from Biella, but this is who she is, and she knows Shah. She's well acquainted with Shah. She understands, and enough clues prompting her, prodding her to go in this direction, right? It's not just that she's doing so just because she thinks. No, no. Very seldom would Biella go just by what she thinks. Yeah, yeah. They strolled past seed beds, areas protected by shade cloth, some covered by glass, some enclosed by glass. Shah was puzzled. She'd been paying attention. Her original reason for approaching Biella set aside for now. Things had taken an interesting turn. Shah had had enough training to know staying aware and letting things flow and development was more than prudent. More than prudent. In other words, advisable, recommended, sought after. Yes. Yeah. Important, in other words, right? Letting things flow and develop, but also to stay aware, right? It's not just this letting things flow. She had enough to know staying aware and letting things flow and develop. Right? Staying aware. Very important to stay aware. Because if you stay aware, by implication, you're letting things flow and develop. At least, if you're staying aware, maintaining awareness, right? Just in the way it's written, it implies that, right? Doesn't necessarily mean so, but implies that. She'd noticed and paid attention to the gardens they'd passed by, assuming significance, but so far nothing implied particular meaning. Biella hadn't indicated anything. With Biella, though, so she knows that she cannot assume when it comes to Biella. Now, I also put this into the story here because I'm also building the character of Biella, right? And to get to know Biella. So this is a very profound thing and is very necessary. So yeah, it's kind of a nice opportunity for me to say, don't take anything for granted with Biella. You never know with Biella. Don't expect anything from Biella. Expect, if anything, expect the unexpected or expect moreness, right? Don't think you know when it comes to Biella. That's exactly, and Shah already knows this from experience, right? that just because Biella's not indicating anything doesn't mean that you know where she's going. You typically don't, right? And this is a very important point to keep in mind with Biella as a category, as a character, right? That she's going to surprise us on a continual basis, yeah? Because she's sharing moreness. Moreness is what she's all about. And the whole culture is about moreness. Shah reappraised the garden, slightly confused, finding nothing inspirational. Everything so work-like, functional, organized in a relaxed way, and order without ordinariness being featured. It seemed it's a nursery. Shah suddenly realized. So obvious. He'd been looking at it from the perspective of inspiration. She failed to see the connection to inspiration. Certainly not where she would have come to be inspired. And this is kind of a clue right there. Yes, that when we look at inspiration, we have ideas and assumptions about what's coming. Yes, and so we want to unhook from those assumptions. Yes, we want to unhook from them. And to say, wait a second, there can be more, there can be more, there can be more. Yeah. And it's very, very, very important, especially when it comes to inspiration. We think we understand things, but in this case, this is what the story is going to indicate here, or at least share, that when we consider our typical ideas about inspiration, those might be a bit limited. And there is a moreness to inspiration that we might not have considered. And that's what Biella is going to demonstrate here, right? And she's aware of this, and she's going to utilize all of the machine, everything, right? It is a very profound undertaking that's going to happen here. When we realize that we can initiate in order to be inspired. Inspiration typically, historically, in the understanding of the word, is you sort of like the poet or the artist, they got the writer's block or whatever, and they wait for inspiration. Oh, the muses aren't being kind for me. By implication, inspiration is something that comes from outside, and it's not under our control. This is the historic understanding of inspiration, right? It comes from the Greeks with the muses. The muses are these particular gods, and their job was to inspire you. If the muses didn't like you, well, tough luck. You didn't get any inspiration. Yeah? You were just out of luck. So being inspired historically, right, and culturally, we've come to understand, or at least believe by default, we just take inspiration to be something that is essentially equated with luck. Well, you're lucky to be inspired, right? Biella is saying, oh, wait a minute. And of course, the new nobility, it's part of their whole culture. No, you can do things. You can do things that will lead to inspiration. Yeah. At least you can initiate a course of events or actions that will lead to inspiration. Now, and that inspiration can come internally. So in other words, you can leverage yourself, right? Those levers and knobs again. Push your own buttons, in other words. Yeah? And do other things. You can basically push the buttons and the levers of the universe to get inspired. As we see, literally, that happens, right? Very deep story from an analogous point of view, metaphoricness, yes? Passing between a large group of tall potted trees and an extensive greenhouse, they entered an untended area of forest. Untended being important here, in contrast to the tended, right? So we're going into the unknown in a sense here. Yeah? The trail narrowed, forcing them to walk single file for a while. That's very uncommon on Nobelia, obviously, because they love walking, as we said before, right? We know this already, that walking and paths and that. So a single file, that doesn't really make for, being able to chat and converse, right? So this is a path that's going somewhere rather than for the purpose of taking strolls, right? A strolling path, not a single file path, typically. Suddenly coming upon a sharp turn of the path around an enormous old and beautiful tree. That's more like it, Shaw thought, appreciating and enjoying the ancient one. A little nod to a story that some of you may have heard. It's the solitary tree and the ancient one. It's a deep story. It's a very, very deep story. And so the Ancient One, yeah, there's a layered nuance here, but it doesn't matter. You don't have to know it to enjoy this, right? And just they regard, trees. Trees are very important in that culture. They are huge. They just love trees and appreciate them and revere trees, as it were. So, of course, an older trees, an Ancient One, just a magical thing, right? Appreciation. Rounding the tree, they came to a clearing. A clearing filled with what? Shah had no way to easily describe what she saw. Whatever it was, it seemed not to be long. It was just, odd. Nothing had prepared her for what she saw. It was, well, an enormous contraption. Now, I use the pictures here. And again, no picture saying this is what the contraption looks like. But this is maybe what it could have looked like, potentially, right? So that's why, I think in other places you see it's a different contraption, right? It could look like this. It's in your own mind, create to you what this thing is, right? At least a dozen paces or more long. At least a dozen or more long paces across. It's fairly biggish, right? And roughly circular. Roughly being the term, using the term loosely. The contraption existed without any real shape. Already we're being cued here to say, don't have any expectations here, right? This is not a usual thing, yeah, not normal, right? It's not a regular thing, in other words, right? With all of this here, right? How can a contraption exist without any real shape? Yeah. It's letting you say, stay open, stay open, stay open. Yeah. Mechanical arms extending from it in every direction. Oh, more than she could easily count. Wow, that's kind of a lot, right? I couldn't find pictures of a machine that had things sticking out from it like that. More than she could easily count. Levers, knobs, protrusions, and casings made of wood and metal. Oh, levers, knobs, protrusions, and casings made of wood and metal, of all shapes and sizes everywhere, as if someone had taken whatever they could find and used it to build. Shaw realized purpose infused the thing. It wasn't just a random collection of bric-a-brac or a crazy sculpture. No, there was an intelligence to the way everything fit together. Certainly a machine of sorts, like not a sculpture or just some experiment or somebody having fun putting things together. No, a machine, a purpose, in other words. And this is again too, right? So all of this is saying, if we go back to the end of the last slide here, we're saying as if someone had taken whatever they could and used it to build. Because Shah is making an effort to stay open. She doesn't just jump from the next thing. Oh, to build a what? Oh, to build a sculpture. Right? So she doesn't get into that assumptiveness, and she stays open. And in thinking this and leaving it open, that dot 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 there, it prompts her mind to start looking elsewhere, because that dot 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 implies, well, I don't quite know exactly what. It's open, yes. And then she says, purpose in Shah realized purpose infused thee, and again she doesn't define it. Yeah, she doesn't say machine. She just says the thing, because well, it's more than that, right? It wasn't just random, etc. Right? There's an intelligence to you, right? Certainly a machine of thoughts, not just a machine. So she continually keeps leaving this thing open, right? She's not defining it because she knows that she cannot. And she also knows if she does define it, she's going to limit her perception. We repeat that. It's a big point there. She knows if she defines it, she's going to limit her perception. She's going to box it and say, well, I think I know, by defining it. And clearly, right, she has enough self-honesty here and openness, and part of her impeccability is to not do that. We tend to want to define things. We want to have knowns in our world because people are so afraid of the unknown. They try and define everything to make it into a known. To make it into a known, to box it, to contort it, to push it into the known. But that just limits their perception of the world. And it's very sad. Yeah, very, very sad. However, and this is the key to the Moreness philosophy, this Moreness magical concept of Moreness. When we see things as Moreness, why on earth do we want to limit Moreness? Then you might as well be saying, if the moment I start to box and package Moreness, I'm turning it into lessness. Can't do it. Can't do it. I don't want lessness. I want Moreness. See, very profound point. Very profound point. So, Shah noticed movement, subtle, but definitely there. She hadn't noticed it before. And if she had stuck in her ideas, she might never have noticed that movement. Because who expects a machine to have this kind of a movement, right? I mean, yes, a machine is working and all that, but you don't expect a machine to be like breathing. Yeah, the machine expanded and contracted slowly, like it was trying to fit its part in, like it was trying to fit its parts in more comfortably, but not really succeeding. A timing to it, almost like a steady breathing. She might not have noticed this unusual, peculiar, anomalous type of a movement, because if she defined it, she would not have expected to see that, and then it would cease to exist. Yeah, in many cases. Sometimes we can still be surprised, but typically that's what, when we start to define things, that's what happens. We limit, we limit, we limit. Shah had stopped at the edge of the clearing to take in this thoroughly unexpected sight. But Biella had continued strolling as if nothing was amiss, and was now coming up to the machine. Shah scurried to catch up. Look at Biella's queuing. But Biella had continued strolling as if nothing was amiss. So Biella's clearly saying to her, I mean, it's like Shah would say, seriously, Biella, you want to come and tell me that you think that I'm not going to see this as something exceptional? Of course, Biella knows that this is going to be something exceptional for Shah. And Shah knows that Biella knows this. But Biella didn't stop and say, yeah, check this out. She just kept strolling as if it was just ordinary, right? So there's an implication for this. She's telling Shah in a very subtle way, and don't have the typical usual expectations. Throw them all out. The typical usual would be say, wow, Biella, this is profound. This is really something. What on earth is this? No, hold. Biella, by Biella acting in a sense almost inappropriately, but it's deliberate. She's cueing and sharing in a way for Shah to say, the usual does not apply. Hold off. Don't assume, right? And also, because she's doing it as if nothing was amiss, she didn't stroll up to the machine with an expectation of like, hello, machine, greeting it, right? And or expectation of be careful, beyond your guard. No, that nothing was amiss. In other words, she's also saying, hey, everything's okay, everything is good. Doesn't matter what comes, nothing is amiss. Yeah, very subtle cueing to set the greater tone of what's coming, right? Very, very powerful. As she came closer, she noticed a sign. Strange, she had not seen it before. Quite prominent. It read, "The Instant Machine of Beauty Creation." A most curious name, Shah thought. Yeah, indeed, a machine to create beauty and instantly. Now, Shah misreads that title somewhere, somewhat, just a little tiny bit. It's not the machine of instant beauty creation. Shaw's thinking implies that a machine to create beauty and instantly. It didn't say it's going to create beauty instantly. It says the instant machine. We got to pay attention. We got to pay attention. That's a very different thing. We assume it's the machine of instant beauty creation. No, it's the instant machine. Yeah, of beauty creation. That's a very different thing. It's a very, 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 very subtle and layered point, right? And to be an instant machine, you could say, well, what does that mean really? Well, a machine that comes about instantly? Yes, but that sort of doesn't make sense. So we have to look for a different meaning, as in an instance. A machine that's an instance that's come about for the purposes of beauty creation. In other words, you could say this is a machine that is a consequence of intent. when you read it as instance instead of instant. But that instant there is, well, if you think of it, well, if you'd said instance, I kind of know what you mean, but instant has a dual meaning here, right? It can, it's forcing me to be discerning. It's forcing me to pay attention, right? So very cool there. Very subtle, very cool. Now it passes Shaw a little bit, right? But that's okay. It doesn't matter. It's just there. It's just there. We now know it's the instant machine of beauty creation. It's a machine that happens to be here now, in the instant, right? Because instant is now. See? So you got to treat it in the now. It's an instant machine, the machine of this instance now, this instant now. Yeah. And of beauty creation. So very powerful nuance there. Very powerful news. Note to self. I never elaborated on this when I went through the story, and it is something I want to share with Bina and Bina and Sher specifically, and Lisa too. Yes, very important, very nuanced. But I mean, we've gone through the story before, and that didn't come up on the name. I'd forgotten about that actually. On the other side of the sign appeared a large red button which said, "Start here." Queuing. Let me read Elizabeth's comment here. I'm noticing the playfulness in a world without superiority is taken for granted. Yes. Now, not that we want to take it for granted, but it's implied, it's innate, it's there. Exactly. The moment you unhook from superiority, play, not as in competition play, but play as in dancing, art, singing. That's all play. Yes. Spirituality. How is spirituality not a profoundly joyful, delicious play? Yeah. And then that when we see this, when the moment you unhook from the superiority paradigm, play becomes first and foremost. What do children do to learn? Young ones, what do they do to learn? They play. Learning and playing are intimately linked. In other words, when we go according to our natural instincts, playing and learning are synonymous. In other words, learning is joy, because play is joy. It's one and the same. To a young child or a young animal, there's no difference between joy and learning. Same thing. It's all play, right? We learn to see learning as a negative. Sad. It's the most horrible thing ever. Really terrible, right? Elizabeth says also, I think good collaboration relies upon playfulness like children. Exactly, Elizabeth. I'm pleased that you are noticing this. It is something that is deeply inherent in what I am sharing. It's deeply inherent in what I am sharing. I am sharing this alternative, right? As an option, not the option, and I don't want to say, yeah. I don't want to always necessarily be making the obvious, right? I am very happy to just put it out there, and hopefully this moreness will be noticed, like you are noticing this. I think good collaboration relies upon playfulness, like children. Trust in the trust of others and of self. Knowing all the prodding is of discovering where the parameters are for now. Exactly, Elizabeth. This is a very wonderful comment. Yes. And I will add this here as a repeat back, because that's essentially what this is. Yes. Right? When you're saying I'm noticing, because you are saying what you've perceived. So this is not a takeaway necessarily. It's more of a repeat back, because you said noticing, right? And I know it's a repeat back, even though it might also be a takeaway for you, because this is precisely what I have been sharing and communicating and intending to share and communicate. Yes. So I'm going to, let's see, which slide shall I add it underneath? All right, since it was a little bit of a delay, I'm going to assume this came to you, at least, culminated in the slide here. Yes, not that it matters too much, but I'm going to put this here. Right. So this is a very, 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 very powerful, very powerful share, a repeat back. Right. I'm going to very much characterize it as a repeat back. Yes. And let's put that up there. Repeat back. I mean, even if it wasn't technically so, Elizabeth, it doesn't matter. It is useful for the purposes of adding it to the program as a repeat back. Yes. Because we continually looking, it's one of our intents is to do this. Yeah. So it adds when I add it as a repeat back. So I mean, I realize that you may not have intended it specifically and deliberately as one, but it doesn't matter. Elizabeth dash entrusted. Elizabeth entrusted. Now I'll put that in as a quote. It is a profound quote also. Yeah? And part of Way of Impeccability, one of the sessions that we do, the skills that we develop, is to learn to deliberately quote ourselves. Yeah. That is, so this is a profound quote, and this comes from Elizabeth's heart. And even though it is also a repeat back, also, it is profoundly, and to start with, it is something that comes from Elizabeth's deepness, from Elizabeth's heart, from Elizabeth's moreness. Right, Elizabeth? This is a sharing of you, of all your moreness, your heart, your deep intent to goodness, your deep intent to moreness. Very, very powerful. Very, very powerful. Oh, did I stop screen sharing or am I still screen sharing? Oh, I did. Okay. All right, there you go, Elizabeth. You added, and I added you under this slide over here. Well, it's not that I'm adding you, I'm adding your point, your sharing, right? Because your sharing is, it's a summation, it's a focus, it's an enhancement of what's being said. Yes. And this is a magical point. This is a magical point. I'm so thrilled that you did notice this. And specifically that this collaboration, to collaborate in that way is absolutely one of the intents of the story. And me, my sharing, I really want to really emphasize that I am consciously and deliberately seeking to communicate that. But sometimes, just because we make an effort to do so, and we may do so very clearly, doesn't mean we get heard. Why? Because of boundaries and because of assumptions, right? We tend to hear what we know. So it takes a little while sometimes for things to filter through and the obvious to become obvious. What you're sharing, Elizabeth, it's profound. It is very profound. At the same time, it's also obvious. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. The obvious is not always obvious until it becomes obvious. It was not obvious a moment before it became obvious. Yeah. So things are out there, in other words, but they're not obvious to us. We have to make a bit of effort to get them to become obvious. Another deep intent of this entire story, and the machine and Biella's intent, is to make the obvious obvious. It's there, but it's to show us how we can initiate and make an effort to connect to that obviousness that's there, but we're not seeing. Yeah. So I love this. Very big deal. Very big deal. Very big deal. And two, the other thing is, just listen up, everybody. Elizabeth is listening to the story. You say, but aren't we all listening to the story? No. For the most part, when we hear stories, they stimulate things in our head, and we listen to what's stimulated in our heads. So we're listening to ourselves. We're listening to our reactions, our assumptions, our expectations, and whatever's prompted and stimulated. Now, whatever's prompted and stimulated from within the boundaries of ourselves is kind of what we know already. So really, typically when we listen to a story, right, we're listening to ourselves. But when we listen to something, truly listen, we're reaching outside, especially if that something is dealing with newness, with moreness, with boundary stretching. When we listen to, we say, oh, wow. Oh, I didn't realize that before. Oh, that's new. Oh, that's different. Right? And we start to think about things. And that's the point here. See, so Elizabeth did a few things here that are really profound. These are way of impeccability techniques that she's applying, right? First of all, listening to the thing itself and not listening to yourself. Listening to the thing itself, right? Secondly, she didn't just listen to it and then accept and say, yeah, whatever. No. She said, no, I am going to think about this. I can't just accept what's there. I can't just accept. No, I have to think about it. And why am I thinking about it? What is the point of thinking about it? And what is my objective? It is to make it my own. If I don't make it my own, I'm just going to be believing somebody else. I'm just going to be accepting. No, I've got to make it my own. It's got to make sense, capital M, capital S, make sense to me. I've got to know it inside out, forward, backwards. I've got to understand it fully, thoroughly, understand it to the point that I've applied a deep discernment so my understanding is real and I'm fully aware of everything that's involved. Why? Because only then will I be able to truly take it into me without reservation. We don't fully understand something. If there's still some doubt involved, we can't actually take it in and make it our own. We can't add it to our operating system. If you have doubts about the code you're going to put into your operating system, don't put it in. Because if it's a bit off, it will ruin your whole system, right? And that happens all the time with people fiddling and messing with the operating systems, right? So that's why people don't mess with the operating system, and why typically most of the developers of the operating system make it very difficult for you to go and meddle with the operating system, because it's so easy to mess things up. So we need to make sure that when we take something into ourselves, that it's done thoroughly, diligently, with full impeccability, right? That's why we've got to make it our own. Making it our own is a very deep, profound process. You got to think it through, over, forwards, backwards, upside down, underneath, test it, experiment with it, yes? And we eventually get to self-proving, which is a very profound way. It's like the final step of it, right? So when we look at all of this, we understand and we see, there's a bit more going on here. There's a bit more going on here, right? So this is a very big deal. So Elizabeth did this. She listened to the story. She listened to what's being shared. She listened to the implications. She listened to the deeper meaning. She listened to the deeper consequences, right? She listens to what is implied, not just what's being said, right? Capital L, listening. Yes. And now she made it her own, and now it has power. See, I wasn't sharing that because Elizabeth's agreeing with me. No, I'm sharing it because it's clear that Elizabeth has made this her own. That's the important point. Not that she's saying something that's already been said. Why do I need to repeat that? The fact that she made it her own, this is significant. This is because this is a course in a program. I want to use this as an illustration. See what Elizabeth did here. This is what we are trying to do for ourselves. Not to agree, but to make it our own, to come to that understanding so deep that we can apply it and make it innate. Yes. Elizabeth, please tell me if anything I've said does not correspond to the actuality of what's going on. I may have articulated things in a way that, well, all right, I'm using maybe words and concepts that you might not necessarily use yourself because I'm paraphrasing. But if what I'm saying is in the essence of it is accurate, but not necessarily the words. Yeah. Does what I'm sharing about what happened, how you came to this, does this correspond with what happened internally? At least mostly. I may have given you much benefit of the doubt in some things, but doesn't matter. I trust in your moreness, right? Sometimes we process things without doing so consciously, by the way, as long as we have that intent to understand, that intent to get to understanding where we can apply. Yeah. So please comment on what I shared there, Elizabeth. You know, I try not to ever speculate. And if I do, I will say, and yes, much of what I'm saying, I feel fairly confident about and I can substantiate. But there is a small measure of speculation going on, right? That point basically, by the way, about the playfulness and collaboration. This is why for the new nobility and in Way of Impeccability specifically, one of our intents is to be sophisticated and childlike, and not either or, and childlike, not childish. Massive difference between the two. When we are childlike, we can play. It's as simple as that. And when we can play freely, unreservedly, then we can get to that magic of play where it's learning and joy and free, and there's no superiority paradigm, none of that nonsense in there. Yeah. Exactly. Given the benefit of the doubt or grace is part of trusting our kids. Precisely, Elizabeth. Precisely. So this is a very deep part of me. It's part of my what is to deliberately, consciously, with deep sophistication, give that benefit of the doubt, knowing I'm doing so, and doing so in a way that is so absolutely a deep entrenched thing that it's not even giving doubt. I just treat it as if it's real. I treat it as real, and so much that somebody looking at me won't even know that I'm doing it as an as if, because it's 99.99999% so. But there is that one part of me, that tiny 0.00000000001% that says, I know this might not be so, but I suppress that. I don't completely deny it or eliminate it, but I put it way down in the deepest, furthest corner of the basement so that it has no influence, right? So when somebody's interacting, right, they see me treating them with full moreness, with no doubts. And this, of course, cues and stimulates and does all sorts of magical things, right? And it leads my brain to come up with that appreciation of your comment. See? I can't do that without giving you beyond. I'm not even giving you maximum of the doubt. I just treat it as take it for granted that that's what you were doing. See, I wasn't even giving you the benefit of the doubt. I went past that. Yes, I was taking it for granted. It's like, well, duh. Yeah. Maybe you weren't doing all that I said. It's possible. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Because you will also come to realize, likely, if you really think about what I said, if you weren't consciously doing all of that, you will say, but can I say I wasn't doing that? I can say I wasn't consciously doing it, but some part in the back of me was doing that all. Yeah? And then you realize that we are more than what we realize we are. It's a very profound thing. Once we have the appropriate intents in play, our moreness starts to work from inside us without us even consciously being aware of it. Now, we do want to learn to be and do this all consciously, because otherwise it's kind of be a bit of a waste sometimes. Yeah. So very, very, very powerful stuff. Very, very powerful moreness stuff. Very, very powerful moreness stuff. All right. I want to see where we are. All right. We're on the start here button. So that's a good place to end, right? No, it's a good place to end at the start. Because, once you started, then you got to keep going, right? So we'll end here on the start here. Elizabeth, I really am keen to also know before we go that what I said was not inaccurate in any way, yes? At least in the most part, right? It's really appreciated. And this is not just something to Elizabeth, right? Again, that superiority paradigm thinking, oh, I'm singling out Elizabeth. Elizabeth is special. No, you all do this. You all do this. Elizabeth has had some training. So she is using these things a little bit more deliberately, a little bit more consciously. And also, I just from knowing Elizabeth, I also know that much of it comes just internally, inherently, right? Subconsciously. I don't know, subconscious is not the super consciously is a better word than subconsciously. In other words, it's happening without sometimes specific, deliberate usage and intent, right? And that awareness. But still, again, I'm not singling out to say you all do this. I've seen you all do it. Look at Bina's comments and Ramsey's comments earlier. Same thing. It just so happens that Elizabeth was doing a repeat back encapsulation of what the program was about. rather than what was going on inside. Now, I do want to hear what's going on inside you, right? So it's not that that's inappropriate. No, hey, don't things be falling down on me here. Sorry. I do most absolutely want to hear what is going on inside you guys. Yeah, because this is magic stuff. This is magic stuff. There is no better or worse in what I am showing, sharing, and doing. There is no this has got to be, this has got to be. No, that's all superiority paradigm thinking. Do what you feel is appropriate. Share, 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 share. Whether you understand it to be appropriate or not, share. I trust your motivations. I trust your intent, even if you don't. So just share. Yeah, like Norma. She was just sharing. I missed it there a little bit, but I trust the intent was good, right? So I didn't understand. I was just confused. That's why I asked, right? And then I said, oh, okay, now I understand, right? That's the magic of it. So what if I don't understand? I will get there. I will get there, right? So very cool. All right, brilliant, Elizabeth. So really, really beautiful. And again, I share this because we don't always get confirmation on ourselves. It's very difficult to do. And we don't want to go looking for it externally because now also can become dependent on approval and other people's ideas and that. But when we do get a confirmation, and especially from a confirmation from a source that we can trust as good intent, it doesn't mean they're accurate, but they have good intent. It's very helpful for us. It's very, very helpful. So I am sharing that I see you, I hear you, I know you in a not a presumptuous way. And I know your heart, in other words. And this is a very profound thing. I see you and I hear you. It's very cool, very cool. All right. Anybody have anything else to share before we go? Wow. I never know where things are going to go. Never know. And that comment of yours, it's really a big deal for me, Elizabeth, because I am striving very hard to communicate a moreness that's not obvious. And that's a very difficult thing to do. And your comment lets me know I'm succeeding. To communicate, not say you got to do this. No, not tell, to communicate. In other words, when I'm communicating it, anyone who connects to it and really pays attention can construct, like you did, can construct the moreness that I'm looking to communicate. Construct it. Not just believe it, not just accept it, no, but construct it, right? Come to it on their own. So I'm doing a layered communication. I'm communicating choice, option, yes. Paths, choices. This is what I'm communicating. You took those choices and you went somewhere. And this is a magical thing, right? It's a magical thing. Very, 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 very powerful. Really huge. Really, really, really huge. Really, really huge. Yeah. Brilliant. 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 All right. And I'm not seeing any more comments there, and I don't mean to cut you guys off. You know what? I did need to check something here. Yeah. In case somebody was here that I didn't know. No. Ryan, I'm keen to hear more from you, but I'm assuming Ryan might be at work and listening, so and the others too. So I love all you guys, truly. I can't say how much you matter to me. All of you. Yes, Norma. I love you in a very special way, more than I won't say more, but yes, I try not to have these gradings and rankings. But yeah, so love is a very peculiar thing, that we can love all equally and love differently all at the same time. We can love all equally and we can love all differently all at the same time. This is one of the magics of love. So yes, I love all of you dearly, and yes, that dearliness does vary. Just how it is with love, right? Just want to make that very clear, very clear. All right, if there's no more comments, I'm going to end. I'm going to end on that. All right, so go, guys, just go with moreness. Go with moreness, everyone. Go with moreness. So cool, so cool. All right, bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.